Some films were harmed in the making of this podcast. From Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the palatial FYC studios, you are listening to For Your Consideration,
the podcast featuring roundtable discussions reevaluating the cinematic canon of past masterpieces and modern classics. I'm your host, Dustin Friesenham.
And I'm Mike Josic. And we'd like to give a hearty shout-out to anybody catching the show on iHeartRadio, YouTube, Stitcher, and if you stream or download the show off of iTunes while you're there, we would love it if you rated and reviewed the show. 5-star ratings, always great, but we want you to be honest, so rate us what you like. And if you have a minute, write down a review of what you think of the show. By the time you're listening to this, we might also be on Spotify. I've submitted us to Spotify, so not sure 100% just yet, but feel free to search for us there. I know I'm going to. Might have to resubmit if it doesn't go up. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome, welcome. If you're a regular listener of the show, welcome back. If this is your first time checking us out, be warned, spoilers ahead.
And welcome, welcome.
So it's been a while. We've been on a bit of a hiatus. For those of you who listen to us regularly and catch us kind of like week in, week out, you've probably noticed a bit of a gap. Anybody listening in the far-flung future, the only thing you're going to notice is the
release dates.
The release dates,
a bit wonky.
But you'll just be able to binge the whole thing, and you won't even care. And you'll be listening to us and being like, why are they wasting my time? Get to talking about the movie.
And so we shall, since there's no point in making excuses and divulging too much personal information.
I just wanted to sort of go on the record as saying that with this episode coming in, trying to sort of get back on schedule, most likely not going to be the hard weekly schedule that we maintained for a little while in 2018, but
until October, where we'll be doing the good old yearly Fright Fest.
Ah, yes, the Halloween Fright Fest. October Spooktacular. I guess to be fair, our 1989 summer was weekly.
All of this is fairly irrelevant, though. We will post when we post, and too many apologies makes us weak, I guess. I've been watching too much fighting anime.
Show no weakness. And so as we said in the long ago Days of Yore last episode, the film that we're going to be covering this time around is the 1928 American silent film, The Man Who Laughs.
A.K.A. the true story about how Heath Ledger got those scars in The Dark Knight. A.K.A. the movie where nobody knows what laughing is. There's a double A.K.A. in there, and we'll get into that.
A.K.A. 2, The Reckoning.
The Laughening?
The Laughening. So let's get to running the credits on this baby and get to putting on our expressionist gloom. The Man Who Laughs was directed by Paul Leni. It was produced by Paul Kohner. Screenplay was by J. Grubb Alexander, Walter Anthony, Mary McLean, and Charles E. Whitaker. It was based on The Man Who Laughs by Victor Hugo. It starred Mary Philbin, Conrad Veidt, Brandon Hurst, Olga Viba-Klanova, Cesare Gravina, Stuart Holmes, Samuel de Grasse, George Siegman, and Josephine Crowell. Music was by, Erno Rapé, Walter Hirsch, Lou Pollack, William Axt, Sam Perry, and Gustav Bort. Cinematography was by Gilbert Warrington. It was edited by Edward L. Kahn and Maurice Pivar. It was produced and distributed by Universal Pictures and had a New York City premiere date of April 27th, 1928, but a wide release on November 4th, 1928. The Man Who Laughs was a film that was not actually reviewed very positively when it originally came out, but like so many other films, has garnered praise in the years since. And I mean, 1928, that's 90 years. I think it was kind of, Wikipedia saying that as late as the 1970s, critical assessment of the film was largely negative. But many critics and cinephiles these days consider it a masterpiece, one of the greatest films ever made, one of cinema's most sensitive and moving performances on behalf of Conrad Veidt.
But even with all that, it only makes it to 894th on the critics poll for Sight and Sound Best Films of All Time.
Wow, there's only one vote for it. One critic. Jan Goransson.
Shout out. Holla.
Whoop whoop, Jan.
Initially released without sound, they decided, maybe let's throw some orchestra in here. And that is the version that we watched, though we could have just as easily hit mute to get the original one.
And I always like mentioning the media that we watched it on. Dustin and I caught The Man Who Laughs on the Kino Video DVD, which was released September 30th, 2003. So, Dustin, The Man Who Laughs was actually your selection. What did you think of the film?
It's been kind of on my list for a long time, in particular because I remember it being touted as one of the very first horror movies of all time. And
Universal horror movies.
No, horror movies. That's how I remember reading about it, that it was one of the first horror movies. And that is completely inaccurate. There is nothing horror about this whatsoever. This is a drama, a romantic drama, if anything. It's about...
It has a tiny bit of body horror in it that you don't even see.
It's about a young boy, Gwynplaine, whose father is killed for rising up against the king. He's disfigured by a comprachio.
Gypsies.
And as they flee, they leave him behind to die. He's picked up eventually along with a blind orphan of a frozen to death woman in the wilderness. They start a little road show where everyone goes to see the man who laughs, and they love laughing at him, and he's just terribly ashamed. He loves his adopted sister in an inappropriate way, but she does as well. The feelings are returned. They get back to a big town where it turns out, well, his dad was super rich, so let's try to get that back on you. The Duchess, who's currently living in his place, would lose everything if he were to return. So there's a little bit of bribery, a little bit of blackmail. And at the end of the day, he doesn't want any of that. He just wants to love his woman.
And the disfigurement in question is basically his face was surgically altered to be in a permanent grin.
And that's actually one of the things that kind of bugged me about the film. I'm sitting there the entire time wondering, how on earth would they have done that? I couldn't figure it out. They would have had to go into his cheeks and like put some sort of string in there and
tighten up some tendons.
I suppose it's theoretically possible, but I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Gypsies, man.
That crazy gypsy
They've got
magic.
some secret ways.
You know that's a racial slur, right?
I do know.
But Mike's Eastern European, so it's okay. He's allowed to say it. It's his word. He's taking it back.
I have Romany in my blood.
There you go. Yeah, that whole premise of what they did to his face, all right, fine, that's old school special effects. And it looked pretty good. Like the constant grin that he and the kid version of himself had. You didn't see the prosthetics.
I wonder how much was actually there in prosthetics. I mean, he might have had something like in his mouth, or it might have been something that was built on top. But like this was made in 1927. I'd be interested to do a little bit of research to find out how they did it, or if that is literally just Conrad Veidt and the kid like just smiling, really grimacing horribly like the whole time.
What I've read is that there were prosthetics, and honestly, I couldn't imagine keeping a smile that wide for that long. That would be painful.
I wondered about that as I was watching it, yeah.
But the way so many people react to it's also ridiculous to me, because when it's first shown, Ursus is like, "Stop laughing." I'm like, he's not laughing, he's smiling. You know what laughing is. All you people who are laughing at him right now, you know what laughing is. He's not making a sound. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
You'd have to assume that he has the smile, but he's not like all the time.
What's so funny would work. Why
are you smiling? Yeah.
This isn't something to be happy about, boy. But no, like it kind of brought me out of the film a little bit whenever anybody would shout out that he was laughing and to tell him to stop laughing. When he was upset that others were laughing, that made perfect sense.
I wondered if it was actually a conceit of the film, since it is a silent film, and it is called The Man Who Laughs. I've never read the Victor Hugo novel. It's not actually considered one of Victor Hugo's best novels. It's considered very much a lesser Hugo novel, which is kind of interesting.
Yet at the same time, the 1928 version is the third time it's been brought to film.
Yeah, and not the last time. Like there's been, I think, 2 times or 3 times since.
I just saw the 2012 version, and it's a lot more Dark Knight to the Tim Burton Batman. It's a lot more gritty. It uses the Chelsea grin as opposed to the permanent smile, and a lot of stuff feels a lot more real. But at the same time, it has its own issues. It's worth checking out if you enjoyed The Man Who Laughs, however.
But yeah, like I was saying, I did think it might have been a conceit of the film being a silent film. You can look at a character who's smiling all the time, and when the title card comes up that says, "Why are you laughing? Stop laughing," like, you might be thinking in your head that there's laughter going on, even though there wouldn't be. You know what I mean? Like, there's kind of like a suspension of disbelief a little bit, whereas not
Except
having seen
if anything, he'd be crying because he's like the most morose person ever. Of course, if someone's smiling and making those sobbing sounds, sobbing and laughing sound pretty similar sometimes.
This is true. This is very true. But it was something that definitely stood out. And it was something that sort of kept repeating. It wasn't just sort of an isolated incident. There was the moment where the guy was peeking in the trailer, and then the second he showed his face in the theater, like, everybody was laughing. Every time he would show up somewhere, or when he was at the House of Lords and near the end of the film, and he's looking at all of the lords, and they're like, "He's laughing at us. He's laughing at the Queen."
But you guys know what laughing sounds like. You're doing it right now. What are you talking about, you insane bastards? I just couldn't get over it. And at the same time, it is the most infectious smile apparently in the entire world, because everyone just couldn't help but smile and laugh at it.
To his credit, and to the credit of the filmmakers and whoever developed and applied the prosthetics, Conrad Veidt looks pretty good as the Man Who Laughs.
Oh, like, he looks super good.
Everything from the facial prosthetics to the hair to how he like uses the scarf, like his whole outfit, his whole countenance and appearance is really well done. Actually, that's a strength of the entire film. The production design, there have been some complaints, and I kind of get it, because this is supposed to be 17th century England, or 18th century England. Was it in the 1700s?
1700s.
Okay, so it's 18th century England, and it looks very Germanic. But the costumes with the royalty and even the poor people as well, like, it's a really lavish, beautiful film, and it looks like they spared no expense. I think it had like $1 million budget or something at the time. It was crazy. So, like, super props to that. I mean, every time that there was something that took me out of the film, there was always something that would draw me into the film. Like, there was a definite push and pull. There's characters that I didn't like, there's characters that I loved. Watching the Deary Moir, I think it was Deary Moir.
Anytime Deary Moir is in there, it is the best scene of the film.
He is so hilarious. And I mean, this is silent, and he's just projecting. There's never any question. It's subtle but over the top at the same time.
The very first scene that he's in, he was referred to prior to that scene by his girlfriend there, the Duchess, who's his betrothed.
Josiana?
I
think it's Josiana.
And she says how, "Oh no, my betrothed would never cause any sort of interesting scandal." And it just shows a picture of him, and he's looking kind of like a doofus. But I was like, "Oh, whatever. It's a drawing of 17th century, whatever. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen, how their drawing skills are. Okay." But when they first show him, like 10 minutes later, it's the exact doofy pose of that portrait, and I was like, yes, this guy is the best already. And later on, when he's wiping his hand on the beef eater, who's just looking
so
at it,
good.
Just everything he does is great, and I love him.
And there was other like really well executed humor in the film as well, like the Queen being surprised and like standing up in a start out of her seat, out of her throne or whatever. And of course, if the Queen is standing, everyone else in the room has to be standing. So like the whole room just sort of gets up during the concert where everyone's half asleep and bored because of this music. And it happens like a couple times, and it's a gag you've seen in like freaking Mel Brooks movies and like other stuff. And it's just, I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting that kind of broad humor, but it's there, and it's so well executed, and it fits. It doesn't feel out of place. in this otherwise dark melodrama.
Another thing, going back to more negatives, that I thought was a little bit odd was just Gwynplaine and Dia. They obviously care for each other. They obviously love each other. She doesn't care what he looks like, but he's so insecure about himself that he sabotages the crap out of it nonstop, and you just want to punch him a little bit, especially when he hooks up with the Duchess.
That moment where he tells Ursus, if a woman who can see me can love me, then I can marry Dia. So he goes off to meet Josiana to basically have this like romantic rendezvous with her, because if she really digs him, he can go back and be like, all right, I'm good enough for Dia, who already has told me that she loves me. Like, he is kind of screwed up in the head over this.
Oh, super screwed up. But then again, it's been his entire life. So you and I wouldn't really necessarily understand what that would be like to be the sideshow carnival freak in the 1700s.
That's true. I mean, I'm not saying it's...
And as a guy, he'd be expected to maybe sow his wild oats a little bit.
I don't think he was intending on actually fulfilling any sort of duties. I think he just wanted to go meet this person and just see how they reacted to him.
But then she gets the note right at the last second, which says that he's actually a nobleman himself, and that she now has to marry him. And all of a sudden now that she has to do it, and it's not of her own free will to screw around on her betrothed, she doesn't want him anymore. She's a complete and total vamp, as it is called.
I actually thought that what she was laughing at was this was something that she wanted, because she fell in love with him at the performance.
She didn't love him. She fell in a bit of lust.
Well,
like, this is someone who's going to fix me of my boredom a little bit.
Movie love.
Because she was running... That's not movie love. She doesn't movie love anything except for herself. She's pure whim. She goes out, is like traipsing about with a bunch of random hobos who are like groping her and licking at her nipples, out in public no less, before her betrothed comes by, starts kicking some ass, and then she gets bored of the fight and just walks off. It's just pure adrenaline for her. If it's not shooting her up with endorphins, she doesn't care anymore.
I was clearly reading into things, but I thought that she was just captured by this creature. She was like, I've never seen this before, and the extremity of his disfigurement, and she was just like, oh my God, this is like everything to me. And that's why she wrote to him and wanted him to come. So when she got the letter saying, oh, by the way, he's the rightful heir to the fortune and land that you're sitting on, and then the queen is like, so you're basically going to have to marry him to lock that shit down, she starts laughing. And I thought she was laughing because she was like, ha, I'm being forced to do the thing that I actually really want to do. But no, it was exactly what you were saying, where now that she was being told she had to do it, she didn't want to do it, and that's why she laughed. And then that's why Gwynplaine was like, she's laughing at me. Yeah.
Because he assumes all laughter is at him now. That's how messed up Gwynplaine is in the head.
So I don't know if that was just because it was a silent film. I do feel like there are some moments where nuance could be lost in a silent film, although the two that we've covered, Metropolis and this film, do a pretty decent job. Like, the performances in this, some of them are very over the top, some of them are very like low-key and nuanced.
The over the top is generally part of the era. I really loved the court jester, actually. The face that he put on all the time. You knew this guy was an evil, conniving bastard. He could express so much with that grin of his. That shit-eating grin.
But we talked about Dirimoire, and like the stuff that he was pulling off. His comedy was broad, but his performance was subtle.
Oh, 100%.
Like, you were just watching the things that he was doing, and the things that he was doing were so ridiculous. And because he just owned it, like, it was, I don't want to use the word nuanced again, but it was a nuanced performance. And Conrad Veidt and Dia, actually, I really dug Dia, and Josiana.
I found Dia actually to be a bit dull. I find that in a lot of these silent films, it seems the leads, and here that being sort of Ursus, Dia, Gwynplaine, they're much more over the top, not quite my style, whereas some of the side characters, like the Duchess and Dirimoire and Homo, is just fantastic.
Oh man, the wolf.
The wolf is that they were so good at training that wolf. such a good dog. But every time they shouted out homo, I'm like, what? No, who? What? Oh, wait, right. That's the dog's stupid name.
And there were like the moments where the dog would attack someone and he just chomped down on his throat. One of the great things about these pre-code movies, like you mentioned Josiana being groped and stuff at the carnival, there was the moment where she was in the bath, having the bath. And like that's shit that would not fly.
After code was in.
Like a few years later. And the violence of the dog like chewing out a guy's throat. And I mean...
And then the dog would be so subtle leading Dea around for like 5 minutes through a crowd. Like, I don't even know how they did that, but good on ya.
Definitely one of my favorite dog performances on film. And just getting back to the Dea performance, like you said it kind of wasn't working for you. I thought she did a really good job of performing a blind person. I thought Mary Philbin did a really good job. There are some really kind of obvious blind performances. And there are performances by like real blind people that you're like, okay, no, that's actually how a blind person would act. And I felt like she was kind of somewhere in between.
I could buy her being blind, just that any of the emotional parts I felt were a bit much.
She didn't have much to do.
She did not.
She really was just this romantic foil for him. And she was supposed to love him no matter what. And occasionally get in danger.
And there was a lot of sort of slapstickiness at the end there when we didn't know what was going to happen like 20 minutes from the end of the film because they were all being kicked out of town.
That's a point that I was just going to get into.
It made us wonder and it drew me in, and then it took too long and it kicked me out, and then she was brought in, and then they sort of red herringed you or just they double tricked you, and then all of a sudden she's getting kicked out again, and you're like, what is going on with this nonsense? Are they going to learn about his being alive, or are they not yet? What's going on?
I actually said to you, we were like 2/3 of the way through the movie, and I said, say what you will about this movie, love it or hate it, I have no idea how it's going to end. I knew the directions that the characters were going in because things had been set up to a certain point, but he's off in prison.
They all think he's dead and are going to leave town.
And there's nothing obvious about it. Nothing is telegraphed at that point. And I, like you said, it drew me in as well. I got really excited to see where this is going to go because I was not expecting a film this old to kind of surprise me that way.
And even when they did telegraph it with the two stagecoaches crashing into each other, Gwynplaine didn't realize who it was, and neither did the other side. And so it just sort of ships passing in the night a couple of times.
But then again, as you said, that last third of the film kind of drags. Like I almost feel like you could probably cut 15 minutes out of this movie, 10-15 minutes out of this movie, and it would just tighten it up a little bit. The fighting and the chasing takes a little while, and really what you want to do is you want to get to the moment in the throne room or the House of Lords or wherever it is, and you want to get to the emotional core of the story, and you want to get to the completion of Gwynplaine's arc. I mean, that's ultimately where everything sort of gets resolved to the point where you know how the characters are going to finish the film. I get that you want the drama and the action, but it just goes on too long.
It gets a little ridiculous by the end. There's some parts of it where it is really, really tightly knit, though, and they did some interesting things for a silent film. I did not expect them to bring a camera up into the Ferris wheel. That was interesting. During a lot of the scenes, especially in the marketplace or the county fair, and later on when they were trying to fake a performance to make Dea think that Gwynplaine was still around, I don't know how long Ursus was hoping to keep that up.
I remember you saying, like, are they going to do this every night now?
Just every night? This is their new job? Let's fake that Gwynplaine is still here but never ever wants to talk to her again directly? I guess. But they had people shouting out Gwynplaine or shouting out whatever just as background noise as part of the sound, which makes me wonder, how do you have crowds as background noise, as sound, but never considered dialogue?
I thought about that too.
It seems insane to me. Then again, of course, the way the films are in silent pictures, the frames per minute, trying to line stuff up with the mouths, it wouldn't quite work. So
it could totally, it might, again, I don't know a lot about silent film and the introduction of sound, but it could, like you say, be about synchronized sound.
Because a lot of the movements are silent film, sort of, they are a little bit too fast.
And because it's all hand cranked. And the sound is literally just incidental background, like crowds and voices.
Gwynplaine!
Like, it's not stuff that's actually matched to, even the fighting, like you don't have swords clattering together. Like, it's just crowds screaming and stuff. So that's probably what it is. Listeners, please don't rake us over the coals for this.
Go ahead. It's chilly here. It's winter coming up, so we could use the heat.
It's not that bad yet.
Get prepared.
Winter's
We'll
coming.
take the coals with us.
Actually, that's an interesting... we're talking about the action scenes. I just made a Game of Thrones reference. One of the things that I really noticed, especially near the end there, with the action scenes, Gwynplaine would go somewhere, and he would be trying to escape. He's being chased by the jester and the soldiers. He would go somewhere, and he would have, like, quite a head start on them. But then they were there. As soon as they figured out where he was...
Gwynplaine jumps out the window. They start running down the stairs. They meet at the ground. It's like...
So I thought this was very, like, final season Game of Thrones travel time. Characters were where they were needed to be, despite how long it actually takes to get anywhere.
Okay, the thing a lot of people don't realize is that, like many a video game, once you've hit certain key locations, you get to fast travel. We hit that point by season 6 of Game of Thrones, so fast travel was unlocked, and it sped things up. Okay, get off their backs. But probably the weirdest arc in this entire film, to me anyway, is the head doctor Capriccio, the head doctor Gypsy, who leaves Gwynplaine at the beginning and comes back later on, tries to blackmail the Countess, and just ends up in prison and killed. It's like, good job, buddy. Like, you just wasted your entire time here. What was your plan? Why did you think that one lone guy who is an outlaw would be able to blackmail anyone without just getting his ass killed? It sets everything off for the last half of the film, the third act.
Which is what they needed. And there's probably more in the book.
There might be. I can tell you that it's pretty much the same stupid move in the remake there for different reasons. But it's ridiculous either way. It's just an idiot goes and gets himself killed, basically. Of course, that might have been more accurate to that era.
It also wasn't completely out of nowhere, because at least they set the character up at the beginning. But I agree. He's kind of there to just set things in motion. And honestly, he kind of fades in and out of the movie for me. Like,
you expect him to be a bit more of a player, and then he's just dead all of a sudden. You're like, oh, okay.
But that's one of those things at the end that was just really unpredictable. Sort of expecting things to go a certain way, and then it just doesn't.
And it does that 2 or 3 times, and it takes its time in doing so sometimes. The one thing, though, you could always count on is that Homo is such a good puppy. Such a good dog actor.
I kind of feel like we should, one of these days, compile, like, we loved the dog in The Thing. We loved the dog in The Man Who Laughs. Just great dog performances.
We'll give it to other animals, too, as they happen to come along. Maybe we'll watch Keanu. Is he good in that?
Hey, man, the death scene of the dog in I Am Legend with Will Smith brought me to tears. That was a performance. You probably don't even remember it.
I don't. But I do remember that I want to do those 3 films as a comparative thing. Contrast.
That could be fun. The seed has been planted, dear audience. Let us know if that's something you want to listen to. What would that be? I Am Legend, Omega Man, and... Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, yeah. I'm pretty much out of stuff. Are you?
It's good to me.
Before we get to the judgment phase of the program, there's one story that just kind of didn't fit in the sort of conversation that I wanted to relate. Dustin originally told me that the film was released without a soundtrack, and then it's one of the first movies that actually got a sound transfer, and we just briefly talked about the sound effects and whatnot. So the film was released without sound. Then they put sound on it because it was popular. And I asked Dustin, I said, wouldn't that be interesting if, like, the DVD had an option where you could listen to it with or without soundtrack? And Dustin said to me,
you mean you could hit the mute button?
That may not be as funny in telling that story again.
But it's one of those things where you, in the moment, realize that you just said the dumbest possible thing.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
And you're happy that only another idiot was there to recount the tale.
Until you broadcast it for all the 500 listeners.
For the millions of listeners we will eventually have.
Potential.
In my dreams.
That's right. So let's cap this sucker off. Let's get into the judgment phase. And Dustin, since this was your pick, would you rate The Man Who Laughs a masterpiece or a museum piece?
I'm definitely going to have to fall on the side of museum piece. There are a number of pacing issues that just really brought me out of it. I mean, the whole makeup thing, the conceit of that's my issue, not being able to get behind that. But the fact that everyone thought he was laughing made no sense to me. The really slow plotting portions throughout, that kind of got to me. It's very well done, especially for its time. But it's not masterpiece worthy, I don't think. It's not timeless enough for that. There's enough that draws you out of it to kill it for me.
I waffled back and forth on this one. At points in the film, I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to go masterpiece. And then at other points, I was like, maybe it is a museum piece. Like you said, there were some pacing problems. By the time it was over, I kind of thought that they balanced each other out and that masterpiece was going to definitely be my determination. And then after we finished the movie, I went onto my computer and directly onto Letterboxd and rated it 3.5 stars. And I thought, if it's a masterpiece, why am I only rating it 3.5 stars? And it was just such a gut, like instinctive, like it still feels right. I still think this is a 3.5 star movie. So I got to go museum piece, probably for mostly the same reasons that you did. It's a beautiful film. It is a classic film. It is an important film. It's
it
worth
created
watching.
the Joker.
It did. It did pretty much
So
create
it's living
the Joker.
on. He honestly looks damn near exactly like the Joker, the classic cartoon Joker. The hair is slicked back. They've got the white makeup for silent films. I mean, it's spot on.
And I know that some critics have said, like, oh, it's clear that Chris Nolan's Dark Knight was calling back to The Man Who Laughs because of the scarification and whatnot. But really, he looks... If the makeup people who did Jack Nicholson in Tim Burton's '89 Batman weren't looking at this movie, I will eat my shoes.
Whereas, like I said before, Christopher Nolan's Joker with the Chelsea grin, that's more like the 2012 version. Because there he has the Chelsea grin, and it honestly looked very Heath Ledgerous, especially since it was also a younger actor, had more of the similar hairstyle, the more messy Joker hair. It wasn't slicked back. Honestly, it's a pretty good comparison to say Batman versus Dark Knight.
Did you say Heath Ledger or Heath Ledgerous?
Heath Ledger's,
Okay.
I think.
Like,
We'll see in the editing.
as in possessive Heath Ledger's. I just thought because of the word lecherous and ledgerous, it was like an interesting...
Heath Ledgerous is Ledger's on lechery.
So there you go. That's 2 votes for museum piece for Paul Leni's 1928 classic American silent film, The Man Who Laughs.
That is not a horror. Not a horror. I repeat again. Who said it was?
Some critics went to the horror because it's dark. It has a dark element to it. Some people think that the smile is a bit ghastly. So they're like, must be a horror. And it is kind of considered one of the early, like 2 or 3 Universal horror films that led into the classic Universal films of the sound era.
See, this is what happens when you start declaring the genre of a film before Cronenberg exists, because now we know what body horror is.
So we'd love to know what you guys think of the film or the podcast or the weather or whatever.
Or the best pizza flavors.
There you go. Should pineapple be on pizza?
Pepperoni and pineapple. All the way.
Works for me. You can hit us up on our Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, all the social media. Just search at FYC Show or For Your Consideration. You're bound to run into us somewhere on the internet. There's also the WordPress blog, which we really should be updating more than we do. And we have a Patreon. If you want to support the show in ways more robust than liking and sharing us on your social media, which you should be doing anyways, spreading the word, all that sort of stuff. Word of mouth is the most powerful form of marketing. Feel free to throw us a couple bucks on the Patreon. And we got some reward levels. Check those out, whatever suits you. Every little bit helps.
And look forward to our next show where we will be covering Mike's choice of...
Matthew Kassavitz's La Haine.
La Haine.
The Hate.
I speak French fluently, but I could not translate that.
So, coming back, trying to like rebuild the listener base, we went with the 1928 black and white silent film, and now we're going for an independent black and white French film. So Just going with like the really popular stuff, just to get the folks back into the groove of things.
Just you wait to see what we have coming in October. That'll help with the audience loving us.
Actually, October should be fun. Something we've talked about for a little while. Going to be another 2 movies, compare and contrast, Halloween related. And there's probably hints to it in this episode.
Feel free to do a deep dive, I guess, if you're that bored.
Got to be pretty goddamn bored. So thank you guys so much for joining us again, downloading us, giving us your time on your commutes or while you're working, whatever it is, however you listen to us. We're thrilled and pleased that you do so. Be sure to join us next time, hopefully next week, when we cover Lehane, as we said. I have been your humble host, Mike Josek.
And I've been your egotistical host, Dustin Friesenhand. Enjoy our stinger and see you next time.
Take care, keep fit, play safe, have fun.
Ta-ta.
And as I always like to mention the media that we watched the film on, this was the Kino Video DVD release that came out September 30th, 1922.
Came out 6 years before the film? That's
right.
Impressive.
That's right. On DVD, on laser optical media.
I'm as impressed as you are, quite frankly.